A simple woman kicked out of resort. 2 hours later, her billionaire husband's yacht arrives. Heartbreaking. The Peninsula Resort, luxurious, elegant, exclusive. A place where only the wealthiest of the wealthy come to unwind. Marble floors gleam under chandeliers that could easily cost more than most people's homes. The air smells faintly of expensive perfumes, and guests stroll in designer outfits, their every step exuding opulence. In the middle of it all, standing with an understated grace, was Grace Sterling. Her simple beige dress stood out starkly in the sea of sparkling jewels and tailored suits. She wasn't dressed in the designer clothes everyone else wore, yet there was something about her that made her look just as important. Grace didn't need diamonds to shine. Her confidence and self-assurance did that for her. She had just finished a 30-minute drive from the local boutique, where she had been reviewing donations for her charity's upcoming auction. Now she was at the resort to check on preparations for the gala that the Sterling Foundation was hosting that evening. Grace preferred to oversee every little detail herself, even though she could have easily sent someone else. It had always been that way, ever since she began organizing charity events out of her grandmother's basement. A simple life she had built up into something extraordinary, one step at a time. When Grace reached the reception desk, she spoke politely to the receptionist, who seemed to hesitate for a moment as she looked up from her computer. Her smile faltered for a brief second, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She looked at Grace again, taking in her modest appearance, as if questioning whether this woman standing before her could really be part of the exclusive guest list. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her voice sweet, yet noticeably unsure. "I'm here to check on tonight's arrangements for the Sterling Foundation Gala," Grace replied calmly, her voice unwavering. The receptionist typed quickly, her fingers tapping on the keys with a speed that only someone who worked in high-end hospitality could manage. But when she glanced at the screen again, her brow furrowed. "I don't see your name here," she said after a brief pause. "Are you staff for the foundation?" Grace didn't flinch. "No," she said softly, with a small smile. "I'm the founder of the Sterling Foundation. My husband, William Sterling, should have called ahead. He's arriving by yacht later." Before the receptionist could respond, a man in a sharp-tailored suit approached. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone condescending, as if already assuming there was. "I'm Bernard Phillips, the general manager," he said, introducing himself with a slight smirk. Grace stood her ground. "No problem at all. I'm Grace Sterling." When Bernard heard her name, he didn't react with the respect or courtesy one might expect, given her status. Instead, he let out a soft, dismissive laugh. "Mrs. Sterling?" He eyed Grace up and down, as if scrutinizing her. "The prominent philanthropist married to William Sterling." He then made a slight, barely noticeable gesture toward her modest attire. "I don't think so." Grace maintained eye contact with him, her expression unchanging. "I can show you my ID," she said calmly, reaching into her purse. "No need," Bernard interjected, waving her hand away. "Anyone can print a fake ID these days." Grace stood still, the security guards now approaching at Bernard's silent command. Their presence was immediate, their expression stern, as if to make her feel even smaller than she already did. "Please don't make this difficult," Bernard said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We can't have just anyone walking in here, claiming to be important guests." Grace noticed a woman in a white blazer discreetly recording the scene on her phone. A subtle move, but enough to signal that this moment would soon be shared with everyone. Grace took a deep breath, but remained calm. There was no point in losing her composure now. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "May I at least use your restroom before I leave?" Bernard hesitated for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Make it quick." Grace walked toward the ladies' room, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she passed the watching eyes of the staff and guests. Inside the bathroom, she locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone, typing a brief message to her assistant, Diane Williams. Cinderella at Peninsula Resort. 2 hours. The reply came within seconds. Understood. Initiating protocol. Grace's lips curled into a small smile. She and William had prepared for situations like these. Instead of confronting people with her name or her wealth, she preferred to let these moments play out naturally. The lessons they learned along the way always seemed to stick better that way. She tucked her phone back into her purse and exited the bathroom, only to find the 2 security guards waiting for her, arms crossed. "Ms., whatever your name actually is," the taller one said, his voice dripping with judgment. "Mr. Phillips has asked us to escort you off the property immediately." Grace nodded, maintaining her composure. "Of course." As they made their way through the lobby, Bernard stepped out from behind the desk, an air of self-satisfaction on his face. He watched intently as Grace was escorted through the lobby, his eyes gleaming with pleasure. The guests around him turned to watch, some whispering, others laughing behind their manicured hands. "Perhaps next time you'll make a reservation under your own name," Bernard called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "We only host the Sterling Gala because Mr. Sterling is a valued patron. His wife is known for her exquisite taste, something clearly not everyone possesses." Several guests laughed along with him, their laughter rippling through the lobby. Grace kept her head high as they approached the entrance. "I'll be sure to pass along your hospitality to my husband," she said softly, her voice calm and controlled. "Yeah, I'm sure he'll be quite impressed with your imagination," Bernard called after her. "Though I doubt he exists, much like your supposed connection to the Sterlings." Grace didn't respond. She stepped out of the grand doors and into the warm coastal air, the sound of the doors closing behind her with an expensive thud. She wasn't angry, not at all. She had faced far worse prejudice in her life. Before meeting William, Grace had worked multiple jobs just to put herself through school. She knew what it felt like to be dismissed, to be overlooked. But those who judged her based on her appearance would soon learn their mistake. It was about to be revealed in the most dramatic way. Grace walked leisurely down the resort's curved driveway, feeling the eyes of the resort staff on her back. When she reached the street, she turned left and continued along the oceanfront promenade, all the while calculating the timing in her head. She knew what would happen in the next few hours. It had all been planned. Grace found a quiet cafe with a view of the harbor and ordered an iced tea, the perfect vantage point. She checked her watch. 1 hour and 40 minutes to go. Her phone buzzed with a message from Diane. "William is furious. ETA 100 minutes. Package arriving in 20 inches." Grace took a sip of her tea, watching the seagulls glide above the water. There was a sense of calm in her now. This was nothing new. She'd faced far worse. She had seen how easily people dismissed others. She'd been the one dismissed too many times before. But today, things were different. Her phone buzzed again. The message was simple. "The yacht will arrive shortly." Grace checked her watch again. The final phase of their plan was about to unfold. As Grace sat in the cafe, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her iced tea glass, she could feel the tension building within her. In the distance, a sleek black car had already pulled up. Her thoughts drifted back to that moment when she had been unceremoniously escorted out of the Peninsula Resort earlier that afternoon. She was angry, yes, but she was also certain that this would not be the last time Bernard would make such a mistake. and soon he would learn the true nature of the woman he had just humiliated. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from William. "Almost there. Everything ready on your end." Grace smiled softly. William knew how to stay calm in the face of anything, but today she wasn't just the wife of a billionaire businessman. Today she was a woman who was about to make a statement, one that would reverberate through the halls of the Peninsula Resort for years to come. She texted back, "Everything's set. Waiting for your grand entrance." The yacht was coming in. The Odyssey, the grandest yacht in the world, built to perfection with every luxury imaginable, and it was about to dock at the very marina that had so carelessly dismissed Grace earlier. She could already hear the waves splashing gently against the hull as it neared the shore, a giant among the smaller vessels. In just a few minutes, everything would change. As Grace continued to watch the water, she couldn't help but reflect on the time she had been judged. Not just today, but many times before. Even in her childhood, she had learned early on that people often judged you for what you wore, how you looked, and where you came from. But it was the people who saw beyond that, who valued you for what you had to offer on the inside, who were the ones that truly mattered. William's wealth had made life easier for them both, but it hadn't been the catalyst for Grace's success. She had worked hard, putting herself through school, making connections with people who saw her potential, not her appearance. In her quiet moments, she always knew that the world's assumptions about her would be challenged when the time came. And now that time had arrived. Minutes later, the luxury yacht's silhouette appeared on the horizon, growing larger as it approached the dock. Grace stood from her chair, smoothing the cream-colored designer dress she had changed into. She had transformed herself. Gone was the modest, unassuming woman in the beige dress. Now she was the woman who could command attention with a single glance. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from her assistant, Diane. "William's yacht is close. All systems are go. We've confirmed the dock is ready and the staff is in place." Grace glanced at her watch. 40 minutes to go. She had time to make her entrance before William arrived. It was time to finish what she started. Grace calmly walked out of the cafe, feeling the eyes of the few remaining people on her as she passed. Her posture was flawless, and her head was held high. She wasn't walking away from anything today. She was walking toward it, ready to claim what was rightfully hers. She had no doubt that the people at the resort, those who had judged her, would soon realize just how wrong they had been. The harbor, with its stunning view of the ocean, was the perfect backdrop for the grand entrance she was about to make. Grace took a deep breath, her fingers curling around her phone, ready to send one final message. She dialed Carter Jackson, the owner of the resort, who was in Europe, having just returned from a charity event. "Carter, everything is in place," Grace said, as she walked along the pier toward the private beach. She was nearing the final phase of their plan. "Bernard's been informed about the yacht's arrival." "Yes, he's been told," Carter replied. "And I've spoken with the marina manager. Everything is on schedule." "Perfect," Grace said, smiling. "When William arrives, make sure he's greeted with the red carpet and champagne, the whole works." Grace didn't need to say anything else. Carter understood perfectly. This was not just about revenge. It was about teaching a lesson. It was about showing Bernard Phillips and everyone at the resort that appearances could be deceiving. As the minutes ticked away, Grace reached the end of the dock and found the perfect spot to watch the yacht's arrival. The anticipation in the air was palpable. She knew that when Bernard saw the yacht, when he realized the enormity of his mistake, it would be a moment he would never forget. And then she heard it, the sound of engines roaring, of a massive vessel cutting through the water with the grace of a predator. The Odyssey was here. The crowd gathered along the dock parted as the yacht made its way in. its pristine white hull gleaming under the sun. The sight was breathtaking. This was no ordinary yacht. This was a symbol of wealth, power, and influence, and it was heading directly for the Peninsula Resort. William was almost there, and Grace was ready. Grace felt her heart race as the yacht docked, its gangway extending with smooth precision. The noise of the crowd grew louder as people took out their phones to capture the moment. But for Grace, this was just another moment in a series of calculated moves. She could see the resort staff scurrying around, making last-minute adjustments. Bernard, who had been the center of her earlier humiliation, was now pacing at the end of the dock, his face flushed with nervousness. William Sterling, the man who owned this entire spectacle, was making his way down the gangway, stepping onto the dock with the kind of quiet confidence that only a billionaire could possess. Grace could feel her pulse quicken as she watched him approach. He had always been the calm, steady presence in her life, but today he was about to stand by her side, and they would show Bernard exactly who he had just crossed. "Mr. Sterling, welcome to the Peninsula Resort," Bernard called, his voice tinged with desperation. William didn't acknowledge him. His eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for Grace, and when he finally saw her, a small smile tugged at his lips. Without a word, he walked past Bernard, heading straight toward her. Grace stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride as she reached out to take William's hand. The crowd gasped as they saw the simple woman from earlier, now transformed into someone worthy of their respect. "Grace," William said softly, his voice filled with warmth. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied with a smile. As they walked together toward the resort's VIP lounge, the crowd parted to make way for them, some even bowing their heads in acknowledgement. Bernard, his face ashen, stood behind them, knowing that there was no way to undo the mistake he had made. "Bernard," William said coldly, not even looking back, "I hope you have a good explanation for what happened earlier today." Bernard's voice faltered as he approached, trying to salvage what little dignity he had left. "Mr. Sterling, I made a mistake. I didn't know." Grace stopped walking, turning to face Bernard. "You didn't know, or you didn't want to know?" For the first time, Bernard couldn't find the words. His mind raced, but nothing came out. "Mr. Phillips," Grace continued, her tone soft but firm, "let me make one thing clear. Next time you decide to judge someone based on their appearance, remember this moment. Remember how wrong you were." With that, Grace turned back toward the VIP lounge, William by her side. As they walked, the whispers of the crowd echoed in the air. Bernard had learned the hard way that wealth, power, and status didn't just reside in what you wore. It resided in who you were, and that lesson was one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The following hours were a blur of glitz and glamour. The gala went off without a hitch, with Grace and William at the center of it all. The night was a success, and Bernard's humiliation was complete. But for Grace, it wasn't just about the gala or the revenge. It was about standing tall and proud, reminding everyone that appearances were nothing compared to what truly mattered in life.